Thanks for having me, everybody. I'm Ashby Miller, my wife Corey. My uncle Mark is joining us tonight, and he's a local. And so we keep about 500 colonies, as mentioned, in the Burlington area. And so the bees are going to do what the bees are going to do. Good night.
Every time.
So that's how we open all the meetings. Literally, these are going to do. So yes, I'll give you a quick backstory. We started in 2020, 2 colonies. I got hooked, so we ordered 50 packages in 2021, and we split very aggressively, and we feed. And we're going into this winter about 500, somewhere in there. So, and we'll get a final count in December, kind of once everything calms down. You know, I tell everybody the wheels came off in July. I'm still at a day job, so Corey's been in nursing school this spring, and we got married, and we just kind of high-fived all year. And it was a tough year, but we made it through. So, of course, with beekeeping, there's 50 topics we can talk about, but what I was asked to come talk with everybody about is genetics, and specifically what we call VSH genetics. That's varroa sensitive hygienics. So I'm going to try and paint you pictures and tell you stories, and I'm going to do my best to take an hour, if that's okay with everybody. And Corey's going to keep me on track for time. And now that I heard everybody around the room about how many hives you have, I hope that this isn't insulting to those who have many years experience, but what I'd like to do is structure this talk for folks who don't have any bees at all, or maybe you're just getting into it. And what so I'm just going to dive right in, and I'm going to jump around at first with thoughts, and then we're going to bring it all together towards the end. So please bear and stay with me. And I'm shooting from the hip, so it's what I like to do. But so let's back up. In the late 80s into the early 90s, varroa mites came to North America, and nobody had ever seen varroa mites. And to this day, varroa mites are the #1 killer of honeybees. The mites themselves, not so much. But imagine if a mite compared to a bee would be like taking a pie plate size bite out of you, okay? And the infections that come along with and the diseases that are spread, we know that varroa is the problem. And so up to this point, and I'm gonna fast track up to just give me a minute, but we've been trying everything, every university, every major bee lab. Major bee labs are University of Minnesota, Washington, Florida, Georgia, NC State, 5 major bee labs. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. Plus all the private industry folks, millions and millions of dollars. And to this day, and the folks with experience will tell you, we have to treat with chemicals. There are ways to treatment-free beekeep, so don't think you can't do this organically. But at our scale, we simply can't. And unfortunately, there are some recent findings, and by the way, y'all, I'm a bee nerd. And as much as I can go down the rabbit hole of any topic, and I love reading research papers and stuff, I'm gonna try and keep it simple. So, a lot of recent data shows that some of our mite treatments may be starting to fail. And that's amitraz, also as the active ingredient in Apivar. Whether or not that data is solid, I watch commercial beekeepers just as much as I watch universities, because universities run on grant money, and the actual beekeepers, their money's where their mouth is. And I tend to take their word, because they got years of experience, over the young college kids who don't. Now, usually most of those universities have people like Dr. Parkey at NC State, Dr. Ellis at University of Florida, Sue Covey at University of Georgia, our own UNCG had Kara Wagner. These are people who are like light years above me. They're also to be listened to. So you have to find that balance. The ultimate fix, you might say, will be finding bees that can manage the varroa mites themselves. And the backstory is so we have Apis mellifera up here, and Apis serrano is a Asian honeybee, and they have wider mandibles. And at first, and we know a couple of types of bees manage mites well. That's Apis serrano, we have Russian strains of honeybees, and of course Africanized bees. They all manage mites well, but the European honeybee does not. And of course, a large portion of our food is pollinated by commercial beekeepers like us. So I recognized early the fix is going to be breeding a better bee. And then we get into how do we breed a better bee. And it works very much like what we do with horses or cows or any others. The bees are livestock. So we know certain things to be fact. We know that lots of genetic diversity in a hive creates hygienic behavior, meaning they like to keep the house clean. But what we've struggled is to find a bee that will be hygienic towards varroa. Certain bee breeders do that very well, and they carry lots of credit. But the time that it takes to identify a colony, a queen specifically, is painstaking. Because before you had to use tweezers, and I say before, we still do, it's called a Harbo assay, where you sit down with a magnifying glass and you literally pick larvae out by the hundreds to do what they call an assay or a sample. And you're looking for varroa mites underneath the cappings. And so Harbo assays led us to find those queens. As breeders, we're able to identify these are good genetics, that colony is managing the hive well. Well, if we dive into the next generation, it's called an F1, and I'm going to bounce back to high school biology. So the queen and the drone, they each bring 16 chromosomes together, and it's here, and here, meiosis as they call it. And so the F1 will carry half the genetics of the queen and half the genetics of the drone. And when we get to the F2s, then it's only a quarter of that original queen. And the problem we've had is lineage on down the line continuing to exhibit the traits. So this year, and I say this year, there's a company called Optera, and y'all had a speaker here. It's Phoebe Snyder. She's a good friend of ours, my wife and myself, and we think the world of Phoebe. And Phoebe's business partner is Dr. Kara Wagner out of UNCG. And so they came up with a new test or an assay. It's called UBO, stands for unhealthy brood odor. And this enables us to quickly test hives, like 2 hours. We can find out, we can perform the test, and we can see how hygienic the hive is specifically to varroa mites. And this now enables us as queen breeders to go through our apiary. We look for certain other traits first. For instance, for us, we're coming out of winter into spring. Our very first, we've got 500 hives. How do you choose which one we want to test, right? And big question. So first thing is, how did they come out of winter? Are they lagging or are they coming out swinging? If you look at it from scientific tests, they all get treated the same way. They all get a pollen patty, they all get veg sugar syrup multiple weeks in a row, and certain colonies just boom. They just have vigor, and that is what we're looking for. And we run mostly Italian bees. We have a touch of Carniolan influence, but majority is Italian bees. So this year we were selected as one of 5 commercial outfits to test UBO at a broader scale. Before they had tested with Michael Palmer up in Vermont. And Michael Palmer, it's his 50th year beekeeping. And he's kind of, for those of you who don't know, he's like the man. That's the best way I know. But we all read the book. He wrote the book. Okay, so and not literally, but he's very well respected as you can call it a private biologist. I guess his money's where his mouth is, and he's always been a big proponent of local genetics, and that's gonna be part of my talk tonight. So let's bounce, and I know I'm bounce around, but stay with me. So we know that genetic diversity leads to hygienic behavior, and I recognized this early on. So what we did, we picked a central location. Let's talk about how queens breed real quick. So queens, a virgin queen, she emerges and she's going to go on her one and only mating flight. And in order not to inbreed, she'll fly approximately a mile out from her home hive. And bees somehow know what's called DCA, that's a drone congregation area. And our goal is that queen is going to breed with as many drones as she possibly can. And there's a lot of speculation as to, well, how does she know what's the proper amount? And the speculation is she feels full of sperm. And so Dr. Tarpey last year identified a queen with 71 different specimens of drone semen in her. And this would be called a super bee. And that's a good world record currently. The University of Georgia, a few years back, they identified, and if you want to watch the video, it's Bob Benny did an interview with Keith Delaplane from University of Georgia. What they found at the University of Georgia in the study is when a queen breeds with 30 or more different drones, then we see a lot of genetic diversity in that colony, and the varroa mite numbers are significantly lower. It's not to say they're gone, but what we can take from that study is the hygienic behavior of the hive specific to varroa is much stronger. And that's a quick way, that's what we're trying to go for here. So, I like to talk. I'm guilty. And I like to talk. I have an hour commute for work every day. So I talk to a lot of folks while I'm driving. And what I figured is, okay, if I know that a drone only goes from the parent hive out about a half a mile, and I don't have a board here, so I'm going to paint pictures with my hands, okay? So I found a central location for our nuke yard, and that's where we do all of our breeding. And we established yards about a mile out all the way around, okay? And the goal is when our virgin queens leave that center yard, we want them to run into our drone style. And this is how in open mating, so you can do artificial or instrumental insemination, and that's above my pay grade, or you can do Mother Nature's way. So what we did was we had apiaries from Burlington. We've got 15 apiaries now, but at the time when we did this, I had 3. So what we did was we identified our best colonies of who comes out of winter swinging and it's 20 miles north, 20 miles south, right in the middle. So we've got a 40-mile span, and those aren't going to be the same genetics likely. So we identified in our colonies just based on who came out of winter swinging. And then last winter, I knocked on about 100 doors. I cold called or cold knocked, whatever you want to call it. And what I would do is come up and I'd say, hey, I'm Ashby. I'm looking to set up a breeding program here. Do you happen to know anybody? How about your cousin Jimbo, Uncle Bob, whoever keeps bees in the area? And what I found is an area, it's about 3 miles by 3 miles. So we've got 9 square miles. And there was only 27 colonies that exist with 3 beekeepers. One has 3, one has 4, and one has 20. So talk to them. And then they know the other beekeepers. And I said, hey, I'm wanting to do this genetic program. Please, 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 don't go catch a swarm. Don't ruin it. I don't want genetics I can't control. And I talked to them about their genetics and who they got their bees from. It turns out that very reputable people. So again, they're bringing some genetic diversity to my area. So this past spring, we bought 120 colonies around our central yard. And what it was there was 20 in the middle, and there was 5 yards of 20 around. So we flooded this 9 square mile area with lots and lots of drones. And without being too big of a bee nerd here, we know at any given day, we're going to see about 150 drones in the air. So if we've got, let's just call it 100 colonies, then we've got 1,500 drones in the air. So if we've got 100 queens that emerge that day, that's a 15-to-1 ratio. It's not very good. Because if our goal is to get 30 different ones, either we need more colonies or we need less queens to emerge on that day, that snapshot, right? So that's what we did. We would spread out our hatch day or our emerge day on the queens so that any given day, the drones would be flooded. In my opinion, this is my opinion, and all these are my opinions, opinions. And by the way, my opinions are all subject to change based on if we find out some new information that's going to better our bees. Okay, so nothing here is concrete. This is just the best of what we know. I think that in order to get 30 or more drones to mate with a queen, we need triple that amount in the area. So our ratio is 1 to 90 at a minimum, if that makes sense. And where I'm going with this is, I want you all to set up your own drone congregation area as a club. That's my whole goal. We're gonna get to that in a little bit, okay? So just bear with me. So, what other thing, let's think about this. When we see when we see virgin queens that mate with at least 30 different genetics, and they were the best that I could find in my area, what do we get as a result besides varroa sensitive hygienics? We get good hygiene that stops European foul brood, stops chalk brood issues. Let's see, we get higher propolis. You can get really mean bees. You can get really swarmy genetics. You can get all kinds of trait specialties. Because if we look at, going back to the high school biology, we've got a drone and a queen with 16 genetics each. So the genetic variation for just one drone and one queen is 2 to the 16th power. It's 65,000 genetic combinations. And I'm a numbers guy, as you can tell. So picture this, if one queen breeds with 30 different drones, then we've got 30 times 65,000. So we've got about 1.5 million different genetic combinations in one single colony. And that is what we know to make really, really good hygiene. Well, I didn't know that back in the spring. I was guessing because, again, nobody's been successful at this yet. So we tested our best 23 colonies. I'm looking at certain criteria during the middle of May that I know to be true when I can compare the colonies one to another. Okay? We took our 23 best. We had 7 high scorers on the UBO. 7 out of 23 is 30%. There's only one person who beat me, and he's Corey Stevens, and he did 50%. And he's been trying the Harbo method for 15 years. And in the world of genetics right now, like, he's leading the way. Everybody knows him. So then the question next is, how can you all as a club do this? And what this is you all live relatively close. So instead of you have 2 colonies here and you have 3 colonies here and you have 2 colonies here, I'm gonna invite you all to this new idea, okay? For those of you with only like 2 or 3 colonies, that first jar of honey is about $2,000. I think most people would agree. And for some folks, you'll lose those bees the first year. I had a lady this year, she bought 2 nukes from me. This is her 4th year in a row buying 2 nukes. 2 nukes. She's $3,000 into this outfit and hasn't even gotten a drop of honey yet. I encourage new beekeepers to start with a minimum of 3. Your goal is in 2 years to be at 10. If you can keep 2, you can keep 10, I promise. I think most people would agree. It can seem daunting at first, but in all the bee clubs I've spoken to, it's really not. And I promise you that. Well, okay. What's the difficulty? Hang on, without this, what's your difficulty? You mentioned one of you mentioned 11.
Micro.
I'm 6.
Okay.
6 and 3.
Oh, 6 and 3. Okay. And what do you find is the struggle with 6 and 3?
My struggle is just the strength, being a woman.
Okay.
That's my problem.
Yeah.
Do you run all mediums?
I do 8 frames, mostly mediums.
Perfect. Okay. That's
Yeah.
well.
I do have a husband that on occasion I'll say, "You gotta come help me,"
Okay.
and he will do that. But
Well, for those of you who may not know, her problem is one of 2 things. Either she's going to let the bees swarm, or she has to make splits early in the spring, and then along with all that honey, if she makes the right amount of splits in the spring, she's going to get a great honey crop, and then all that honey's really heavy.
see, I had 2 coming out of the winter.
Okay.
I had 7.
Yeah.
I split them both, caught 2 swarms, and split again. And now I've combined 2 bags, and now I have 6 going into here.
Yeah.
Chicken nap.
It's chicken nap. It's
I have
it's
chicken
bee nap.
too.
Oh, okay. Well, the advantage though at 10 colonies is you can make enough honey wholesale, you can make enough splits. I tell people to keep about 10 colonies is probably maybe $3,000, $3,500. It's a bit more than the 2,000 up front. But the benefit is bees die, bees have problems. The really nice thing is you can go steal from Peter to pay Paul. If one colony here is doing bad and you've got 4 others, you go steal 1 frame of brood. They won't miss it. You give that 1 weak colony 4 frames of brood. Remember, we just introduced 4 different genetic strains at one time. The next 6 weeks, there's lots of genetic diversity. We boost the population. You're robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and Peter doesn't miss it, and Paul gets a big boost. Usually with 10 colonies, it's not going to happen overnight. But usually at the end of 2 years, people are getting excited. Like at 10 colonies, you're making a commitment. I know you are. I mean,
No, I've made a commitment at 6.
right. Let's picture this room's got 20 beekeepers in this area. I'm doing times 10 colonies. That's 200 colonies. That's flooding with drone stock. That's better mated local queens. My queens are at 800 feet elevation down in the Piedmont, and I trade genetics with other beekeepers in my area. But where I'm going with this is, picture somebody's got some land and you knock on some doors in 4 directions. So picture your central nuke yard, go out a mile, knock on some doors, 4 directions. And now, let's say, and you're gonna team up, and each location just needs like 4 hives. There's 4 of you in a co-op, right? And so each of you commits, I'll put 4 here, 4 here, 4 here, 4 here. That 4 people put 1 colony each area. And we all share a central nuke yard. And now no matter which way your virgin queens go, you've got a drone flooded area in all the way around. And now you don't have to go buy stupid crazy genetics or pay the prices as hobbyists, but you're getting the quality. You're getting I'm going to run you the numbers for my operation, and I'm going to turn it into the hobbyist, okay? So with 300 colonies last year, we went into winter with 307, we came out with 256. We lost 51. That's 15%. If I could get the bees to manage the mites better, we could get that down to, let's say, 5%. That 10% rough numbers is 30 colonies. 30 colonies for me in the spring means 60 nukes for sale. That's about 12 grand. And then 30 colonies makes honey. That's another 10 to 15 grand. So just by breeding a better bee at 300 colonies, it's 25 grand back in my pocket. Suddenly that $1,000 breeder queen doesn't seem so expensive. But for smaller folks, or hobbyist level, maybe what you do is you say, you want to run a co-op, 4, 5, 10 people get together, and we're all going to purchase a nice breeder queen or 2, different people, and you split the costs, and you help each other out, and you don't have to graft. You could essentially, let me give you a quick walk-away split, what they call it. You just remove the queen to a nuke in the same yard, and come back in about 8 days, and there will be all kinds of cells in that colony. And those with experience can teach you this method, but you take those cells and you start new colonies. You can have the best genetics in the world, but if those queens don't go out and mate well, it was all for naught. So, what I'm proposing is this, and I'll tell you about our own operation. There's 4 of us in a co-op. We're going to trade genetics. So I'm going to give my virgin queens to them, they're going to give me virgin queens back. I'll let their virgin queens mate with my local drone population. The reason being is, the studies done at UNCG show with VSH genetics, 80% of the trait is passed through the mother, not the father. So it's better to trade virgins than for me to like send my the original theory was, how about I send my virgins to breed in your drone yard? we don't get the result we want. It's you give me the virgins to breed in my drone yard. There's the trade-off. That's what we know. So I know enough about this area. If there's only like 2 hives here and 2 hives here and 2 hives here, you're almost too spread out. But imagine if you've got 3 right now, you could potentially take 6 nukes come spring. If you would join in with 3 other people, that's 24 nukes. If we spread those genetics in an area like that, that now fully encapsulates an area, and now anybody who needs to breed can bring it to that center location. It's just a matter of moving hives at night. That's when we move hives. And then you come back in a month and you see if the queen has bred or not, but you've created that drone congregation area with high number of drones, proportionate to the number of queens that are going to emerge. And that's how we get better genetics. And then what do? So let's say you've got that queen back, that F1. Now what? How do we do? You gotta wait a year. Has anybody here ever had a garden? Anybody ever, like, we're tomato farmers. We did about 2,000 German Johnson tomatoes. The first 2 seasons, they were failures. I had to try again next year. It kind of stinks. The benefit with thinking a little bigger is these are gonna die. If you start with 10 and you come out of winter with 6 or 7, you've got enough to repopulate your stock for next year. And the nice thing about this new UBO test is it's going to become public this coming year. I know it may even be another year because the waiting list is pretty big. There's a big demand from us breeders. But the point being, the ability to test genetics is going to become much more cost and time efficient. A club could go in and say, hey, we want to buy 25 tests. They're going to be like $20 a pop. It's very reasonable to identify your strong colonies. And so let me explain what we're going to do in our outfit and what I would encourage you all to do. Let's first start with a fun question. Now let's suppose it's April, and around here it's probably late April. How many of you would go kill all of your queens today? You gotta know, No, hard no? Okay. I will go kill every single queen I've got in this coming March. They're gone. Except for my breeders. That is something I'm going to do. With that, I'm going to requeen every hive, but they're all going to be bred from, our co-op has about 20 breeder queens. So at the time, whenever we bring that cell, we'll bring the cell in on day 8. She'll emerge on day 10. And she will go mate with all the drones in that area. And then we'll come back in 3 weeks, and we'll take those queens and we will requeen our hives, okay? And I want every colony in my outfit to now be a daughter of a high-scoring queen. Because again, 80% of that trait is passed through the queen. We know that to be fact. And I'm doing that looking forward to the following year, 2025. The reason being is we're going to retest. Those are going to be brand new queens in the spring of 2024. We're going to test, that'll be like March. We're going to test them in May. That identifies our breeder queens for 2025. In 2025, we're going to kill all the queens again.
Doesn't that, you're talking about building genetic diversity. It seems by killing down to 20 breeders, you're really limiting your genetic diversity.
But remember, the genetic combinations are within each hive. So one hive could have 1.5 million genetic combinations possible, right? But that really what that means is we've got a slew of different drones. Right. Workers are diploid. They are mother and father. So queen mixes the egg with the sperm in her. The queen determines if she needs it to be a drone, a haploid, or a diploid, a worker. Those drones are genetically identical. They're haploid. They're a non-fertilized egg. So that the area is flooded so picture this. Let's call it a Friday. We're going to kill the queen, and then the new queen emerges on Sunday, 2 days later. That's a day 8, day 10. Well, at the time that we kill the queen on Friday, her genetic identical is flying 150 strong per colony in this area. So we have the genetic diversity from the drones in the area. And then we're giving the genetic diversity via the queens to the new queens, the daughters. They'll emerge and mate with, and by having just 20 different breeder queens, and we're into the millions of genetic combinations now. But what we're looking for is a trait. Remember, you can have VSH in any race of bees: Caucasians, Carniolans, Italians. We can identify this trait. Is what the same way we can find a swarming bee or a not swarming bee. A spicy hive, a gentle hive, that kind of thing. I ask people what would be your willingness to go kill your queens, and most people everybody has their. I got my favorites. Corey has her favorites. We've also got we bagged a hive. That means we covered it in a black trash bag and let her cook in the sun for a week because they're that spicy. I mean, they're that mean. Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, we have, and we cull out any. We're going for a gentle bee. I want to talk about my show and tell item. This is a queen castle.